We're in Art Bridge's storage, looking at a large sculpture by Isamu Noguchi. This is Shaft and Root, and it was made near the end of the artist's very long career.
Noguchi created this series of 26 galvanized steel sculptures to support the longevity of the Isamu Noguchi Garden Museum and Foundation. I would argue Noguchi isn't typically known for metal work. I would say he's more known for his work in stone and ceramics.
And wood.
And wood, exactly.
These are sheets of flat steel that have a galvanized surface so that they're corrosion resistant, creating this incredibly beautiful reflective surface with all of these extraordinary patterns.
He essentially combined kirigami, which is Japanese paper craft, with metalworking. And so ultimately the work appears as one cohesive material versus pieces welded together.
I think most people are familiar with the art of origami, but kirigami allows for the cutting of a piece of paper as well as the folding. Here, the metal has been cut and folded, although also welded.
There was essentially a predecessor series in 1958 where he's working with the same techniques but with aluminum. And this came at a time where he had just returned from his travels across the world, and he really associated aluminum as a distinctly American material. And so creating that series of aluminum sculptures was almost a statement of belonging for him, that he was an American as well as Japanese.
And in fact, the artist used metal very early in his career, probably most famously in that extraordinary relief sculpture for the AP building in Rockefeller Center, one of the jewels of New York City.
And he makes a lot of references to this aluminum series in his galvanized steel sculptures. For example, there is a work called Baby Figure in the aluminum series that appears almost identical to another work in the series called Goddess. And so he's still thinking about similar concepts, but using a new material.
There is a great sense of fragility here, but because this is steel, it is incredibly strong and it's able to hold itself up.
Right now, it looks almost like the surface of the skin or pebbles in a stream. It looks like snowflakes. And so there's this interesting connection between what we see as a very industrial, man-made material with the natural and the changes that come with natural processes as well. The sculpture is going to change over time. It's going to become darker. It's going to develop a different patina. But this change is important and integral to understanding the entirety of the galvanized steel sculptures.
So despite the fact that it's gone through this galvanizing process, it will still ultimately corrode. Let's take a close look at it. Let's start with the base, which feels as if it's a long piece of metal folded once, twice, 3 times. And then to give it a bit more stability, it's almost as if he's wedged in an additional piece.
And in certain angles, it looks weightless, like the negative space in the base makes the entirety look light. And Noguchi's always been interested in thinking about weight and substance and how he wanted to deny these forces.
And yet, when we walk around at another angle, it all looks solid, and we lose sight of the fact that it's actually hollow. That little wedge-like diagonal feels so contingent, seems so jerry-rigged, almost as if he placed it there spontaneously. And yet, when we move up from this base, we do sprout up. And there is this sense of rapid growth. Now, all of a sudden, I'm starting to think about the metaphor of a plant.
This goes back to how Noguchi's placing metal with natural processes and how the two aren't so different from each other. That metal also can grow and change over time as well as a plant. What is also interesting about this work is that it's so linear and angular, whereas when we're thinking about plants, it's such an organic form. And so Noguchi is, once again, not putting the organic and the mechanical at opposite ends.
From one particular angle, the sculpture becomes completely asymmetrical and feels unbalanced. The solidity of the base then becomes even more important.
Noguchi addresses a lot of contradictions in this work, whether it's asymmetry and balance or whether it's metal and the organic. And I think that really harkens to his own experiences of being Japanese and American, he had to constantly negotiate what it meant to be both. And so I think it says a lot that one of his last series in life is to create works that meld these so-called binaries or so-called contradictions with each other.